Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to the Treaded Path, the podcast from Kofi Productions, where we explore the inspiring journeys of Muslim professionals across diverse industries. I'm your host, Salman Hasan, and each week we sit down with remarkable individuals who are making their mark in their chosen fields. We highlight their successes and challenges in their journey, examine corporate accountability within their industry, and offer any actionable advice on career advancement, ethical navigation to those who want to tread that path. As a reminder to our listeners, you can find the show notes, resources, and ways to connect with our guests in the Treaded Path archive in kufiproductions.com. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Omar Bassal, Chief Investment Officer for Shukr Investments. He has begun investing since 1994 and held senior positions in various investment companies here in the US and the Middle East. He's also the author of the book Swing Trading for Dummies. So with that, Omar, assalamu alaikum, and thanks so much for joining us.
So it's a pleasure to be with you.
And before we dive into the story, can you give our listeners a brief overview of what you do in your current role?
Sure. Bismillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi ishrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So in my current role, I am responsible for overseeing the investment activities of Shukr Investments. Shukr Investments is a money manager. So we manage money on behalf of institutions as well as individuals investing in public equities or stocks.
Nice. Great start, great description. I want to ask you what drew you initially to the investment field, investing in general. What was so exciting about it, or that really motivated you to start doing the investment work?
Sure. So my parents are immigrants to the US, and my father is a physician. So when I was younger, I assumed or thought I would be following in his footsteps to study medicine, but I never had any passion for it. When I was in high school, my father was investing his own money, and I wanted to help him out because he's as a physician, the physicians don't typically get training in investing. And when I
Sure.
learned about it, I started to become interested in the field. I think what interests me about investment is that, every day is a new kind of challenge, puzzle. It's trying to piece together different parts of a story. It's like a mystery in some sense.
Yeah.
So I like the challenge nature. I like the mystery, the solving nature. And I like the fact that about investing is that, the, earnings people make from investments is not necessarily tied to you've gone to college a certain number of years or you've spent a number of years in working. It's really reflective more of a person's ability to manage themselves and understand the markets. And therefore it's really kind of disentangled from that. So were
Sure.
the those were the aspects of investing that interested me about it. The fact that it's mysterious, challenge, that there's always a new kind of thing you're trying to solve, and the fact that the earnings can be untied to, people's education or experience.
That makes sense. Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of the elements of the unknown and that mystery element that can make things exciting and keep you on the edge a little bit as well. So we'll talk more about that in a bit. But you mentioned your parents. Were there any other, or are they the only early influences that kind of shaped your early career aspirations, or were there other mentors or influences that kind of brought you to a little bit to where you are right now?
So I grew up in Tennessee, and in the age of period when I was growing up, there was no internet. So internet
Mm,
kind of came towards like my latter years of high school.
sure.
And so the influences most heavily were my parents. And my parents didn't influence me for investments, but they did give me the freedom to pursue what I enjoyed doing. I would say that I was someone who enjoyed reading. So reading helped me access some of the brightest minds of investments and learn from them. And so I never met those people, so they weren't a mentor, but there were influences from reading books of staff or professionals that were successful in the career of investing.
Nice, nice. And if you could tell us a little bit about your, education, your early educational journey, or where did you study? How did you select your field of study? Did you know that this is the path you wanted to go down, or did you have to make some changes along the way to get to the point where you are now?
Alhamdulillah, I'm very fortunate that I knew at a very early age what I wanted to pursue. And therefore, when I was in high school, I was investing in stocks in high school. So, I did invest. So the first
Mashallah.
stock, alhamdulillah, the first stock I bought was in 1994, and I was 14 years old at the time. So in high school, I knew I wanted to do investing. And so I started to research what are the top institutions that would teach investing, that teach finance. And I looked at school rankings. So again, this is where we had to buy books of rankings. You don't just do it
Right.
online. And I was also influenced by some of the authors I read. Where did they go to school? And so what I ended up doing is through my research, I learned that one of the top programs in the States for finance is the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School of Business. And so I applied what's called early decision. I was so committed to the school. I said, if I get accepted, I'll go to this. I would commit to it. And alhamdulillah, I was accepted to the university early decision. And I was fortunate, blessed that they also awarded me as what's called a Benjamin Franklin Scholar and a Joseph Wharton Scholar. These are the honors programs of the university and the honors program of the business school. And so I was able to, and I'll mention as a side note, one of the reasons I was able to, I think, be competitive from coming from Tennessee, where there's not as many people applying, where whereas from California, New York, some of the
Yeah.
bigger metropolitan areas, there's a lot more applicants, was that I was able to in my last year of high school. I didn't actually go to high school. I went to college. So I worked out a deal with the superintendent, with the principal, that basically permitted me to my senior year of high school to just attend it at the university. And so I literally applied with like all these college credits. It was just a nice, I mean, this is another thing about Tennessee is that, they can do different things. Like
Yeah.
literally they're flexible. So
Yeah.
I was able to apply and I came into the university as a sophomore because all my college credits transferred. So alhamdulillah,
Mashallah.
that was one of the
Alhamdulillah.
benefits I had.
No, first of all, the acceptance rate for the Wharton School of Business, right, is very one of the lowest in the nation. And so to be accepted is one feat. And then on top of that, you got multiple scholarships to, to attend, mashallah, and at such a young age. So, I mean, the impressive, it doesn't begin to describe, mashallah, your achievements. I'm sure along the way you've faced some challenges, education, even post education as well. So, what were some of those challenges when you started university, and even a little bit post grad? What were some of those challenges that you faced?
So when I went to the university, I was a little bit nervous because I was entering the university and all these other students who were coming in were typically they had all these AP classes. They were at like super competitive high schools. And I was worried that how am I going to keep up with people like that? Like they're so bright and and so what I did learn once I entered university is that as Muslims, we have natural built-in advantages. And what I mean by that
Yes,
is that, from a very, the Muslim that follows their deen avoids haram activities. And so immediately I have an advantage because I'm not wasting my time with alcohol, drugs,
you're right.
partying, chasing after the other sex, that stuff. And so that's already an advantage. And what I also learned is that if you invest the time, you can even for difficult classes. So I took difficult classes and I did have to get tutors sometimes, but I wasn't ashamed or like to get a tutor. And so some of my classes I would just have like a dedicated tutor throughout the year and I would meet once or twice a week with a tutor. And so it really made the class so much easier for me. So I think that
That's good.
the challenges were there, but you have to get over the fact that, don't be so nervous about the competition. Realize that we have natural build advantages and then invest your time in the classes, but also if you have to go for tutors, you know, uh, do it. I mean, I after my freshman year, I got it's funny. The school notified me that your writing skills are not that great. They literally just said, "I'm sorry, you're."
Really?
Yeah, they said your writing is not great, and you need to take, in addition to your normal classes, you have to take additional writing a writing class. And so it wasn't for credit. So I literally had to do extra work, but it wasn't going to count for anything, so to speak. But what happened is that because I went to the writing class, I strengthened my writing. And then I made my weakness of writing, which I wasn't great at, better. And so then what happened is that, later on down the road, I would actually write a book. But for me to write a book, I had to improve my writing skill to a level that I could articulate
Sure.
ideas
Yeah.
clearly. And so the other thing is that don't think that your weaknesses, don't try to minimize my weaknesses or avoid those things. It's actually turn them into a strength. So
Yeah.
focus where you're weak and then make that weakness into a strength, whatever it is.
100%. Yeah. Where, whatever it is, or where, in whatever capacity you're in, definitely um, that's something to uphold, throughout your life, inshallah. And so you mentioned about being Muslims has its unique built-in advantages, right? And I think you were going a little bit into it, but I want to ask you a little bit, um, this question about, were there moments that you felt your faith has helped you guide certain difficult decisions you had to make, right? Or keep turning points in your career path or your journey? Were there points in your life that, like, the dean kind of helped you guide to that direction?
Yeah, I think that sometimes we might think of our dean as something we go to in times of distress. But the reality is that you always go to your dean. And so it's not, I learned this over time. It's not just for critical decisions that we lean and look at our dean and for look for guidance, but even small decisions. So when you're constantly turning to Allah and you're constantly making dua and you're constantly seeking forgiveness and guidance, then you will find success on every level. So when you say were there specific points, I mean, certainly, applying to the university, applying for a specific job, you know, um, those are big decisions in as a young adult's life. And those are critical times where we want to turn to our dean, or if there's an ethical question that we have in our work, which frankly comes up a lot in the investment field. So those are clear times when we need to turn to our dean. But what I would later learn is that, you know, like I'll give you an example. I was flying on a I was flying out of Seattle to go overseas, and I really wanted to get a window seat because I wanted to be able to see when Fajr and Isha,
Yeah.
Fajr and Maghrib times are, and they told me no options, no window seats, and then I was walking to the check-in counter. I just made dua, Allah, please bless me that I get a window seat, and I got there and they gave me a window seat. Like that's a small
Uh,
thing, but like the reality is that it's a constant turning to Allah for everything because those who put their faith in Allah, their trust in Allah, Allah will guide them. So I would say it's really we learn over time that it's everything that every matter in our lives that we should be turning to Allah.
I'm so glad you said that, because while we talk about our professional life, our journey, right, and turning to Allah, you know, um, you know, uh, during those decision points, you're absolutely right that even in our personal life, throughout the life, we should always constantly turn back to Allah for guidance, for inspiration, for you know, um, anything, right? If you want a window seat, if you want to, be able to go for Hajj, right? No matter the ask, you should always turn to Allah, right? And so faith, and this is the point I was trying to get at, your deen or faith actually enhances, your journey, right? And your whatever aspect of your life that you need enhancement, will always be there to answer the calls.
100%.
In that light, um, I want to ask you, while every moment is important, like you said, was there any pivotal moments that you would say that was like defining a defining moment of who you are right now, right? As an investment officer or someone who's worked in the investment field for so many years. And maybe you already shared this, right? But if you did, could you share that again? Like that one pivotal moment that like made who you are right now today.
Are you just specifically with the investment career, not about like broader, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. With your
I
investment
mean,
career.
I think that the pivotal moments were my family's support for pursuing what I was interested in, my investment in reading the basically the best books on the subject. So educating
Mm,
myself about how investing is done properly. I would say that my openness to learning from different approaches. So the thing about investing is that there's so many different ways people invest, so many different
right.
tools. And so there are some people who only use this tool, and there's some people who only use that tool. But I was open to all the tools. And so that was another key differentiator, is that I'm not only using one tool set for investing. I would say that the decision on the school was a major decision. I would say that, post my graduation, the issue of working at conventional companies versus Sharia compliant companies. So, some of my career was at working at a conventional investment company. And certainly I would say that it's better, we should avoid that.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's better to work at Sharia compliant companies. It's better, and some people would go further and say that it's not permissible to work at conventional companies given the work that they do. So I would say that there was a point in my career where I just said, from now on, I'm not going to work for any conventional company. I'm only going to work for Sharia compliant companies. So those were some of the key areas in my investment career that were pivotal, from the educating myself to the decision about the university to the openness to what kind of tools to use to the decision to only work at Sharia compliant firms.
Mashallah. No, that's great. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Even though the question was if there was one key pivot moment, as you rightfully said, there are multiple points in life that kept you in the path that you are right now, right? But the first one being that you had the backing support of your family, which is really important because if your home is, not a safe space for you, or like you don't have the backing support of your family, your spouse, your parents, or whoever is important in your life, you'll always be wheeled back or be troubled in your mind and won't be able to give your full potential and achieve what you want to achieve for yourself in your career path. So I appreciate you bringing that up. But come back to the Sharia and compliance and working with ethical companies or companies that are aligned with your values. How do you evaluate that? Do you have like a framework? Do you have a set of rules, or are you really following what Sharia outlines, right? The Sharia law. Like, how does that work for you personally, and I guess at Shukr Investments?
So at Shukr, it's pretty easy because we actually have a contract with the Sharia Advisory Board, and so we are able to simply go to our Sharia Advisory Board with questions that we have about our investments. If there's a
Okay.
questionable company could be engaging in human rights abuses, because all companies don't come out and just say, "Hey, we're engaging in human rights abuses." There's more to it. There's more nuance to it than that. So I would say that for the company, it's very simple because of the Sharia advisory board. In my personal life, I would just say that, look, you need to be able to, especially younger people, access those who are more knowledgeable, right? So, ask those with knowledge
Yeah.
if you are in doubt. So I would simply say it's a question of finding those people that are knowledgeable, especially with respect to the religion. Like, you don't want to find someone who's knowledgeable in finance but not knowledgeable in Islam. That would not be a good. You're not going to get good recommendations. So I would say that, someone knowledgeable, someone who fears Allah, someone who is a moral person, that would be the right person to go to. So that's my framework. Is when I have a question, because I mean, I can try to answer it myself, but the concern I would have is, am I answering it that is in the way that I want, like, to
Yeah.
give me the decision that I want, right? Which is not right. So when you get a third party, you can get a better kind of sense of, hey, is this the decision that is beneficial for my dunya and my akhirah, or is it instead of the decision that's best for my, maybe financially, not necessarily from my
Yeah.
religious perspective?
That's absolutely right. It's very important to have a third party involved because, like you were saying, if you try to make a decision on your own, it may not be the decision that you need. A lot of times, you make decisions of what you want. Oftentimes, the third party or someone neutral, um, or it can give you objective advice that say, "Hey, this may be what you want, but this is what you actually need," right? for dunya and akhirah, like you mentioned. And so, what I'm sure you've had a lot of these dilemmas that you face, but what are there any common ones you can share with us? Any common dilemmas that you see in the investment field or investment world that people make a lot of the times?
In the investment field, it happens often because the way that we approach investing, not only the way we approach, the way that most Sharia compliant investment firms operate is that they follow what are considered widely accepted guidelines for investing in a compliant way. These are called IOFI, which stands for the Auditing Organization of Islamic Financial Institutions, is what I think it is. IOFI is an organization that has set out standards which institutions follow. So you can follow the standards, but the reality is that there are still going to be questionable issues for on a company level. And what I mean by that is that you will have a situation where a company might be generating certain revenues from a source that is questionable. Okay. So, I mean, one example we saw was a company that launches satellites. That would seem to be totally fine. But then maybe a lot of their business is launching satellites for governments that are going to be using it for weapons or for military. So now it's a question of it's a satellite company, but some of their business is for defense purposes. And a lot of times those defense purposes could be killing innocent people, right? So that's one example. It can also come up with, we saw this with a Chinese company that makes solar panel cells. They're operating in a part of China which is known for human rights abuses, especially from the Uyghur population. The company doesn't say, "Hey, we are using slave labor," but they're operating in a specific area where there's known human rights abuses, right? So these issues will come up where you're looking at a company and it passes the official guidelines, but if on closer inspection, there's some questionable activities. So yeah, those come up all the time, and we have to, the safest thing is just not to invest in them.
Hmm.
And sometimes we'll raise the matter with our Sharia board and ask them for their view, and just follow whatever they tell us.
Wonderful. And you started. My next question was about asking, in regard to accountability, right? How can individual professionals or even groups or organizations advocate for more corporate accountability? And I think you already started answering that, but if you can be a little bit more specific or action oriented, like what steps can those professionals make to make sure that they're making the right decisions?
So, look, in the public equity space, the way the institutions demand accountability is by voting. So, when you own shares of a company, you have the ability to vote on certain matters that come to shareholders. And you can actually, if you have a lot of the company or even a small or 5% of a company, you can actually propose resolutions, you can propose specific matters. So, those institutions can make a difference. The reality is that, at least in the West, it's very rare that Islamic institutions are managing enough money or able to exert influence through the voting process. There's a few firms in the
Sure.
US that probably manage a lot, and they're able to, and so you can actually, you can put a resolution forward to a company saying, you need to stop all business in the occupied territories. So for example, if you're familiar with booking.com or Airbnb or
Yeah.
Expedia, all three of those companies offer bookings in the occupied territories. Okay. So as a shareholder in those companies, you could potentially, if you had owned enough shares, you could potentially push for a vote to get the company not to do that. And sometimes when a vote fails, even if it fails, the company might reconsider when they see that there's some minority of investors that are not happy with that situation. So
Yeah.
let's put aside the reality that most of the time we can't exert it through voting. What we try to do is one way we do it is by adding an additional layer of avoiding investment in certain companies that are engaging in certain activities that are problematic. So if there's lists that are being published online about companies that are potentially supporting governments that are committing genocide, and therefore we want to avoid investing in those companies even if they are compliant according to the typical standards. So one way we do it is by being stricter about how we're investing. Another way we do is we try to circulate our approach to other managers in our industry. So, for example, we have sent the list of companies that we have that we won't invest in, even though they're compliant according to the IOFI standards. We will there are certain companies that are, like, for example, Caterpillar is a very simple one. Caterpillar is
Yeah.
compliant on IOFI, but Caterpillar is providing a lot of their earth moving equipment that is resulting in the destruction of people's homes, right?
Right.
So, that's example of a company where you want to circulate a company like that and say, hey, don't invest in those companies because even though they're compliant by IOFI, they're still engaging in human rights abuses, or they're at least knowingly selling their products to governments that are engaging in human rights abuses. So that's how we do it: is we have another layer of avoiding investment in companies, and then trying to popularize our methodology with others in the industry.
No, mashallah. There's certainly, thank you for explaining that. And there's certainly a lot of ways to push for reform. And as you said, right, outside of voting, there's if you're not in the room, there's not a whole lot an individual can do. But organizationally, if we have that collective power, then maybe yes. But from a research standpoint, what what emerging trends in the industry kind of give you hope that inshallah people are practicing more ethically, or there are more ethical practices in place that kind of be able to make those reforms in the industry itself?
I think that the promising is the growth in the first, I would say, socially responsible investment category, which is a
Okay,
massive, because that includes not only the Sharia, but also includes like Catholic investment, other religiously minded. Some of them aren't even religious, some of them are just secular. So the growth in that kind of business, especially in Europe, has been a promising development because companies feel more pressure to adjust their practices in response to that growth.
sure.
I'll give you an example. Norway, one of the things about Norway is that they have this a massive amount of investments because they have this fund to manage their oil wealth. And Norway recently added specific companies to their exclusion list that were involved in human rights abuses in Israel. Okay.
Wow,
It was earth shattering because Norway has, like, I don't know, trillion, few trillion
that's
dollars of,
amazing.
and when they put that exclusion list, immediately all their managers have to avoid investing in that company, and then you have a knock-on effect where other companies actually just simply follow the Norwegian exclusion list. So that was a huge positive development, happened this year, and they're avoiding investment in companies that are, involved in human rights abuses. I would say that but the other thing that gives me hope is the growth in the Sharia space, because that's been happening by leaps and bounds. When I was starting my career, there was one or two Sharia managers in America. Now there's multiple, and they're not small, they're sizable firms. And so this is another big positive, is that the growth in Sharia space, more Muslims are wanting to invest their money ethically in a Sharia responsible way. And therefore it's going to have positive knock-on effects as the industry grows, and we can
Inshallah.
we can inshallah vote more to tell companies, "Hey, we care about how, your operations are being done, and we want them to be done in an ethical way."
No, alhamdulillah, that's very inspiring, and inshallah, I hope the same can happen in the U.S. Although that for that to happen probably might take a lot longer than um, some can hope, but inshallah, one day it will.
Inshallah.
So I want to pivot over to resources and advice that you'd recommend, or the advices that you have. Are there any books or websites or publications that you recommend anyone to be knowledgeable in not only just the investment world, but what stocks or portfolios to look into so they can do their own personal research and also from a professional standpoint as well?
Sure. So when it comes to investing, I would say that if you are in a career like electrician or a pilot, or something not investment related, then the education I would recommend would be different than the education I would recommend for people in investment career. And I strongly discourage the idea of um, anyone not in the investment field trying to manage their own money themselves. It's really difficult, and your emotions will play with you, and you can destroy your savings. So, for sure, the books I would recommend for someone who's like a pilot or engineer or a plumber, those people, I would say, would be much more about like understanding the, you know, investments in general. What is a stock? What are Sharia options for investing in, cash, real estate? Those are the kind of generic things. And understanding about diversification, for example, because you want to be choosing a manager to manage your money. Whereas if you're in the investment field, then it's going to be more specialized because you're going to be actually managing people's wealth. So if you're pursuing real estate, then you have to learn a lot about residential real estate, commercial real estate, industrial. You have to learn about how valuation is done. And then if you're looking at private equity, that's a different approach. You're going to have to learn about company valuation. So, I mean, specific books, there's a series called The Little Book that, you know, there's a series called The Little Book that they have really, the reason I like that series is that they typically bring established professionals in these different areas to educate you. Like when they talk about
Nice.
valuation, they bring a gentleman named Damoud Iran. He's a professor from NYU. He's considered the most knowledgeable when it comes to valuation. So he wrote a valuation book under the Little Book series. When it comes to public equities, they'll have again established person that will talk about that. Like I think one of the first Little Book series I read was by I think Joel Greenblatt, who talked about his approach to beating the market. So I think that's a really kind of introductory kind of way. And then if you are going to be focused on that field, you can get into more detailed knowledge, like detailed books that will cover things like you know
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all those resources, and I hope people watching and viewing can benefit from that and actually go take advantage from these resources. If one could tell, we're always stressing the importance of continuous learning, not only in the investment field but wherever you are, right? Because if you're managing your money, or anyone, or if you're managing anyone else's portfolio, you have to constantly be aware of the trends and what's changing, what's not. So, in your words, can you explain why continuous learning, especially in the investment field, is super important?
I mean, it's so let me mention something here. Excuse me. So you need to be learning about your religion, your deen, right? So
Yes.
I didn't talk about this at the beginning, but one of my early interests when I was in school was comparative religion. And so I was exposed to some very amazing teachers, just I mean, this is through cassette tape or videotape.
Yeah.
But what happened is that my deen, my yaqeen, my certainty was very established because I learned why Islam is true and how to give da'wah to other people. Okay. So I mentioned that because education, one of the first things that you need to learn your own deen, you need to understand why we believe what we believe. It's not simply sufficient to say, I believe Islam because my parents are Muslim. That's not sufficient. We need to actually know why Islam is the truth.
Yeah.
So your first learning needs to be on the deen, right? You need to be doing at a minimum the what's required, the afrad, the fard, what's required.
Sure.
When it
Yeah.
comes to knowledge, because I see so many people who just focus on dunya knowledge, and that's a disaster. They'll be experts in medicine, experts in
Yeah.
engineering, experts in whatever, but they know very little about their religion. When it comes to your field, of course, the thing about continuous learning is that if you are not investing in it, you will be left behind. You will hurt yourself. And so the easiest example that I can give today is artificial intelligence. It's making major changes across fields.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
and so I'm reading a book right now about how to use artificial intelligence in investing because I didn't learn that when I was in high school or college. We didn't have
Yeah.
that. But you're learning, step by step. So if you're not learning how to apply it, you're simply going to be out. Others will outcompete you, and your skill sets will degrade. Whether you're again, whatever field you're in. If you're, even I was even seeing even a cab driver, like you need to still learn about your area with fields because at the end of the day, there are changes that are going to happen that could affect your business, and you might have to think about how do I position myself to benefit in these changes because these changes impact every industry.
Absolutely. I think you couldn't have said it any better. But you're absolutely right. When it comes to education and continuous learning, we see, young professionals, or those who are post grads. One of the biggest mistakes they make is the wrong influences, right? Going to the wrong people. What would you say is the biggest mistake you've seen young professionals make, and how can they rectify that or correct that mistake, or prevent that from happening again?
So let's first, preface it by saying, not I'm not going to include the mistakes of like religious mistakes, meaning that again, if they're not like getting up to pray Fajr, like, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you're not getting it, you need to be getting the religious in order first. That's the most important thing. Okay. So assuming that someone has the deen in order, they know their requirements, they're following the requirements as well, then I would say the biggest mistake I see people making is focusing on the financials and not focusing on learning. So, where you learn a skill or post graduation, is so critical because it's going to impact you throughout your career. The quality of the institution matters, but also what matters is the quality of the direct boss you'll be working for. So you can have a great
Yeah.
institution
Yeah.
and then a horrible boss, and then you don't learn much. So better to have a great boss who's really well accomplished in an average institution than to have a horrible boss at a great institution. So I would say that it's so critical in the earlier part to focus more on learning because that will carry you through for and not just focus on, oh, which company will offer me the most money or which company offers
Yeah.
me the best schedule for my, like when you're younger, you can bear these kind of burdens more than someone who's older who has, you know, a spouse and children,
Sure.
etc.
Yeah.
So I would really say focus more on your direct boss. What is their knowledge base? How are they interpersonal skills? How are they? And you have to learn that not by talking to the boss. I mean, that's one source, but talking by others who have worked under that person. So I would say that would be so critical to get your skill sets strengthened later on.
And that's very important. And I would take it a step further and say that, theory, right? You can be the smartest, person on the planet. If you don't know how to put it in practice effectively and, with the right mentor and guidance, then no amount of theory will, make you the person that people would want to work with or collaborate with or be in any association with, right? Whereas the flip side, you're not the smartest cookie or smartest person, in the room. But barring the religious side of things, you have a great mentor, you have a great influence, you're mentorable, right? And you're able to put to practice effectively what you've learned. The latter person is much more effective and will be much more successful than the first person.
Agreed.
So I just wanted to put that out there. So I think we're coming up to time, or a little bit up to time, but I want to, give some time for how we can support you as an individual, as someone who represents Shukr Investments. Are there specific ways that people can support the causes or changes that you've discussed today, or anything in particular that you hold dear that people should be in support of?
So I didn't talk so much about Shukr Investments. What I'll briefly explain about Shukr is that I founded Shukr in 2013, and my goal was to establish an investment company that achieved basically the highest type of returns for its investors while following ethical Sharia guidelines. I named the company Shukr from a verse in the Quran. So in Surah Ibrahim, the 14th surah and the 7th ayah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you show shukr or gratitude, then Allah will increase you. So I believe that there is a connection between shukr, gratitude, and increase. And so
Yes. Yeah.
the way that Shukr Investments shows gratitude, there's different ways of showing gratitude. Like I could say, Alhamdulillah, Shukr lillah. This is called Shukr Lisan. It's gratitude on the tongue. The way that we show gratitude at Shukr Investments is that we donate 50%, 50, of the performance fees we generate to charity. And we let our clients allocate that to different charitable causes. So, and we believe that this charitable giving is a reason for the success of the firm because we believe of the connection between shukr and increase. So, the reality is that our firm is only available for what's called accredited investors, which means basically people that have a net worth of $1 million or up. And so the reality is that most people, unfortunately, at this stage, we're not able to offer our products to them. We only can offer to accredited investors. So I would simply say that people can follow us on LinkedIn. Certainly, if there are those that may have a interest in our products that meet those requirements, then they can definitely reach out to us. Otherwise, I would simply say that you think about investing your money in a Sharia way. If not with Shukr, then one of the other investment providers in the U.S. And that just helps the industry grow further. And inshallah, that it's accepted for you. I would just say that make sure that the manager you invest with, who says they're Sharia compliant, make sure that you've done some diligence. Like, do you have a Sharia board? Do you have a Sharia audit? Those are the kind of questions that you want to be asking, because anyone can say they're compliant,
Right.
but you
Yeah.
do need to make some effort on your side to make sure that there's some third party that have confirmed that.
Thank you for providing that description and explaining what Sugar does and its objectives and what makes it successful, right? I think that's really key to understand that, like, you know, anyone can start a business, anyone can, start anything. But as you highlighted, right, the key to success, or one of the keys to success, is tying your finances to charitable giving. And so when as as Muslims, the more you give, Allah returns that back in multiple, right, in different ways that we can't imagine. So thank you for sharing that with us. Is there anything, or let me ask you this: what's next for you or for Sugar? Like, is there any upcoming projects that you'd like to share with us, or anything that the public should be aware about?
So um, I'm focused on akhirah. So I very much want Shukr Investments to do good for the ummah, to do good for in terms of investing, and that my hope is that we can encourage others to adopt our model of the charitable giving aspect, because I do believe that as you properly said, wealth is not diminished by charity. So we don't think we're losing money by giving. So my hope is that we can encourage other firms to adopt a model of charitable giving from their profits, from their revenues. What we're working on, Sugar, is just to educate more people about our approach, and to, inshallah, at one day be able to offer products that everyone can invest in, not just accredited investors. So that's inshallah in the pipeline. Inshallah, that comes to fruition.
Inshallah.
And then that way, we can definitely uh, inshallah achieve very competitive, very differentiated returns for all people, not just for a certain segment.
So would you say that's the legacy you hope to leave within the industry before?
When it comes to legacy, like what I care about is Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. I'm very happy to die as an unknown person. If what I want to leave is a continuous charity. So in other words,
Yeah.
if Shukr can do good for the ummah, if it can do good for finance in general. I mean, if it educates people about the dangers of riba or usury or interest, if it can educate the reasons that investing your money in a way that is focused on the compliant activities of companies is superior to not caring about those activities. If we can encourage companies to adopt different ways of their business, these are all things that potentially Sugar can achieve. And so my legacy, as I want it to be with my creator, I really am happy to die. No one who knows who I am, but that Allah is pleased with me, that He accepts the works as being for His sake only. That there's no, in other words, that we're truly sincere about why we're doing what we're doing. We can't be doing something, an act of worship for any reason other than Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. So, if I'm doing something for fame or for money, then I've ruined my intention. So, inshallah, that my intention
Inshallah.
keeps remains pure, and that
I mean,
the goal is for this to be for the benefits of others.
inshallah, may Allah accept from you and all your efforts. And it's truly, I think it's truly noble intention and cause to have, to be able to, I will say this: not many people would want what you just said, right? Where they will want to leave the world without being recognized or known, but want to leave the world a better place, for the pleasure of his creator, of our creator, right? So, and so, um, I hope, I pray to Allah that you get all the success and all your efforts are accepted and your du'as are answered. So,
Jazakallah khair.
Wayakum. And so before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners that we haven't covered or that I didn't touch upon?
What I would share is that, when it comes to charitable giving, I remember when I was younger, I would start with $25 a month. And then after like a few months, I realized I could do $50 a month. And then after a few months, I realized I could do
Yeah.
$100 a month. So I would recommend, don't do your charitable giving like as a one off every now and then. Make it a automatic thing every month to one of the, mashallah, very well respected organizations that are out there. And so make that automatic. And I would say that, don't compromise your deen for like a dunya matter. Don't say that I will work 5 or 10 years in this bank and then I'll shift to doing something Sharia compliant. It's better to always do things compliant from the beginning. And even if you're sacrificing wealth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can reward you more and more. So I would say that don't, compromise. It's better to do things from the beginning properly, even if you're sacrificing money because at the end of the day, the reward is with Allah and He can increase you multiple fold more, even if you're doing something that at the outset might look less promising from a financial perspective. We know that there's an ayah in the Quran about Allah basically giving people money from where they don't expect,
Yeah.
giving people rizq from where they don't expect. So rizq can come from where you have no idea it will come from.
That's great advice. I would love to end it on this, positive note. So inshallah, people can benefit from, from you and from what we discussed today. So thank you so much for sharing and joining with us today. Your
Thank you.
professional journey insights will definitely resonate with the listeners. I know it resonated with me, so I'm sure there's a lot more people who can relate and be inspired by your path. So with that, Jazakallah khair, and we'll
Wiyakum.
end it here, inshallah. So, to the
Jazakallah
viewers,
khair.
thank you for listening to the Treaded Path podcast. You can find all the resources our guests mentioned in the Treaded Path archive in our website, coffeeproductions.com, along with the links to connect with our guest speakers. If today's conversation inspired you or helped you in your own professional journey, we'd love to hear from you. So please leave us a review, share the episode with someone who might benefit, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. May your treaded path be blessed and full of wisdom. Assalamu alaikum.